All right, welcome. Welcome everyone to this Q&A. Again, want to welcome everyone to this Q&A. Want to speak about something that, I don't know, might be a little bit controversial, but, I've already done on controversial issues on Tanakh Talk, so may as well mention it here today, only because today is today's election day, right, here in Israel. As most people know, if you don't know, whatever you know now. So I thought I would, whatever, I'll take other questions also, but thought that would mention, the different sides of how to view, how we look at the Jewish state, how we look at Zionism in general. So you have one view that'll say that you can't do anything to build up the states, until the Messiah comes, meaning that it's basically forbidden to, settle the land, or any of that till the Messiah comes. And that's mostly held by certain Hasidic groups, which is interesting that even though they hold that outside, that there are significant numbers of them that live in Israel. So that itself, that in of itself is a question. In other words, if you don't hold you're allowed to build up the land or live in the land, then how in the world can they have people that live here, right? Second, the second opinion is that, it's really, so I would say, all right, maybe another opinion within this opinion, right, that says that, there's a mitzvah to live here. Right now, what happens if you can't live here? There are different reasons why a person may not be able to live in the land. Let's say, parnasa-wise, for making a living, or finding a spouse, learning Torah. Let's say person learns Torah better, outside the land. There are a number of reasons why person, may choose not to live in the land, which, are legitimate. But at the same time, a person has to realize that if a person can't live in the land for legitimate reasons, okay, so it's a mitzvah if you can do it, right? They're not an easy place to live for a lot of different reasons, right? But if a person can do it and they're able to do it, they should. If they can't do it, it's not like they transgress, a Torah command every single second. It's what we call I'm going to forget what the term is, of course. It's not obligatory. It's a mitzvah, what we call a mitzvah kiyumis. A mitzvah kiyumis means if you can do it, if it's possible to do. Not every mitzvah is possible to do, right? In certain things. There are obligations. I don't want to say, this mitzvah you can't do, so they don't do it. It depends what it is, right? But there are some mitzvahs in this case, if a person can do it, right? And if you don't do it, and if you can't do it, okay, so it can't be a transgression every single second, right? It doesn't make sense. There are great people who never came here, right? Vilna Gaon tried to come here, Elijah Vilna, more than 150 years ago. Sorry, 250 years ago. He didn't make it here. Chofetz Chaim didn't make it here. There were great rabbis didn't make it here, right? So it's an obligation if you can be here. Now, that being said, That being said, what we see that goes on here, and anyone who's ever read, which I don't recommend, but anyone who's ever read The Jewish State by Theodore Herzl, then they understand what his view and what the view of the secular Zionists was, right? And that is, it's a state of Jews. What does the state of Jews mean? It has nothing to do with Torah mitzvahs. So that's already problematic. I mean, he wrote an editorial. And basically his idea of saving Judaism and anti-Semitism was to have Jews convert to Christianity, which, he had kids that converted to Christianity, right, etc. So his goal was basically to have a state of Jews, which means it has nothing to do with Torah mitzvahs. It had nothing to do with Torah mitzvahs. What was their goal? He would have been happy with Argentina. He would have been happy with Uganda. He lucked out, right? They lucked out. They got the state of Israel. Okay, so now when you look at it in those terms, so you have people coming to the land that want to build up the land, even though, again, another misnomer is the fact that secular Zionists think they were the first ones here. Not true. The students of the Vilna Gaon more than 250 years ago, they were here first. That's why a lot of the customs of what we do, here in Israel, go according to what the Vilna Gaon says through his students. Now, a lot of them died trying to dig out the land and the swamps and all that. A lot of them died in the process, of disease. So first mistake people make is, ultra-Orthodox Jews are anti-Zionists. Well, they were the first ones here, right? They were the first ones here. But what's the issue? What's the real issue? The real issue is that their goal, and he states clear, right? There's no, Herzl said it, the secular Zionists said it. Their goal, 100%, to uproot Torah. That's their goal. They don't have anything to do with Torah. My Rebbe's Rebbe, or Moshe Schneider, blessed memory, wanted to come to Israel, wanted to emigrate. They didn't want him. They sent him letters saying, we don't want these old European Jews. We're not interested, in their old ways. We want new Jews. Not going to have anything to do with Torah mitzvahs. That's what they wanted. Now, this is, this is all verified. This is not something that, he's making it up, he's talking out of his elbow. Secular Jews, that's what they want. And this country was a communist country for a long time. Communist, socialist, right? I mean, there aren't too many left. Real Zionists today are probably cab drivers. I'm not exactly sure why. Right? But, so people will say, well, don't you believe, it's probably the best place spiritually to live, strongest Torah communities, certainly here in Israel, no question about it. No question about it. Doesn't mean everyone can live here, right? Doesn't mean it's so easy to live here either. All right, it's probably in the top 5 of most expensive places to live, among other things. Not to mention dealing with the Arabs and all that, but, regardless, their goal, and we saw by this last government, which was unbelievably bad, and their goal is to uproot Torah. They want to deal with kashrus their own way. There is a status quo here. Chief Rabbinate has control. They want to take control away. They're interested in letting anyone do whatever they want. Comes to kashrus, having their own rabbinic courts and different things. The people don't know anything about Torah, right? That sort of goes against the status quo. But their whole goal, and thank God their government fell, was to uproot the status quo. And basically, to have a free-for-all, when it comes to conversion, comes to kashrus, can have any Reuven, Shimon, Levi open up their rabbinical court, do whatever they want, so thank God it got knocked off, right? That the government fell. I mean, especially when they have to, rely on Arabs, to be part of the government. So we'll see what's going to be. We're going to see what's going to be. with election today. But there's another aspect, and I wanted to mention there are two schools of thought when it comes to voting in general. Right? One school of thought, the majority of rabbinic authorities hold that, okay, for better or for worse, we have to have a say. And, if we don't have religious parties, then this country would be no different than any other country in the world. Right? That is true. Right? That I would agree. Because, if it was up to the people in charge, and some of them have said this explicitly, that when we finish, when we're done dealing with the Arabs, we're going to deal with the ultra-Orthodox Jews. Right? So there's a lot of hatred when it comes to Judaism in general. Why? Very simple. If you represent Torah and you want to bring Torah mitzvahs, they're born and bred hating that. They want to do what they want. They want to go place on Shabbos. They want to have buses running on Shabbos, all kinds of things. So there is a major issue when you're in the palace of the king and you're living in the palace of the king, i.e. here in Israel, and you're messing around and doing terrible things, there's going to be serious payback. So my Rebbe should be would say, I'm not worried about Iran. I'm not worried about Iraq. I'm not worried about any of these other places. Right? God will take care of them. That's not what I'm worried about. What's he worried about? He says, I'm worried about people living in the land that transgress what God wants. In a horrific way. Not just minor things, talking major things. Go to Tel Aviv, right? Gay capital of the world. You don't think there's going to be payback for that, God forbid? Right? A lot of terrible things go on here. A lot of good things go on here. Right? Yeah, you have the greatest place of Torah, the holiest place, where God's presence still is, even though we don't see it direct. But you have great amount of impurity, right? Against that. So most rabbinical authorities will tell you, if you'd ask them, should I vote? They'll say 100%. 100%, because we have to be represented. We can't let this, these leftists get into power, this and that. And if we don't have political parties, it'll be 10 times worse. It'll be 10 times worse than what's going on now. 10 times worse. Now, there's a minority opinion, and it's a minority opinion that says that, okay, we want to live here, but we don't have anything to do with the government. We don't want to have anything. We're not going to take money from the government. There are plenty of schools they get money from the government. Right? So the other side will say, we're not going to take money from them because we don't want them to have to say in anything we do and say we have to do this and that and the other things, put in our curriculums. Right? As my Rebbe would say, we'll tell them to go eat kugel. Right? We're not going to listen. So we're going to do what we want to do and we're paying for it. We're not taking their money. Right? So that side will say, you don't vote. Better to stay in the opposition. Now, the majority will say if you're in the opposition or you don't have to say, it's going to be 10 times worse. Okay? That very well could be. But I want to point out one thing. And that is, why would the other side say it's better to be in the opposition? Why would they say it's better to be in the opposition? Because if you have religious parties part of the government, and there's desecration of Shabbos, right? And there has been, for building trains and other, tracks and other things. And it's right underneath their nose. So if you're in power, quote unquote, you're part of the government, and they're doing this right in front of your face. That's called being guilty by association. That's guilty by association. How can you be part of that? Not to mention the fact that they hate Torah, they hate mitzvahs. How can you sit with them? How can you speak with them? All the negativity is going to come out of it. They're going to say, well, the other side will say, you do what you got to do. You don't have choice. It's not a good situation. Good. Right? So I would agree. I would definitely agree. At the same time, when these things are going on that go against the very basic fundamentals of what Torah stands for, how can you be part of that? If you tell me they know about it, but they look the other way, and when they look the other way, maybe they get in a kickback, maybe something else, to look the other way, how can they do that? How can you be an Orthodox Jew and do such a thing? How can you do it for the sake of money? I'll give an example. Give one example. That many years ago, when the Russians started coming, tens of thousands of Russians came. The vast majority of Russians that have come to Israel are non-Jews. That has been proven, no question about it, by the Central Bureau of Statistics in Israel. Been proven. So the chief Sephardic rabbi said that months ago, and they wanted to take him away from his position and censure him and all that. How can you say such a thing? Blasphemous. What? You think we're bringing in non-Jews? He goes, you know what my proof is? You idiots. My proof is your own statistics. These are your own statistics that show that all these non-Jews are coming in. 95, 98% of these Russians coming in are non-Jews. They're non-Jews. So Rebbe claims, a little bit hard to understand, but he claims that they let him in, and now, if God forbid there's a war, whose side are they going to join? They're not any lovers of Jews. They're just, it's better being here than, in the former Soviet Union. I get it. But he said, that's why we have problems with the Arabs, because of that. Now, what's going on? Take it one step further. There are Orthodox Jews in charge. One of their portfolios way back when, many times it's in the hand of Orthodox Jews, is the Ministry of Interior. Now here, what is the ministry? What are the things the Ministry of Interior does? Is they check out who's allowed to come into the country, who's not, by their Jewishness or not, by what we'll quote unquote the law of return. Now, if in charge of that portfolio, Ministry of Absorption, if you have ultra-Orthodox Jews in charge of it, which at the time, and many times that's the case, but specifically in that time, that was the case, how can you look away and allow all these non-Jews to come in? It's supposed to be a Jewish state, right? You have all these non-Jewish Jews come in, turn the state on its head. Because then, you got all these non-Jews, you got all these Arabs also, put them together, they're, very sizable minority, so to speak. But they knew that. And they said straight out, this was, all over the news years ago. They said straight out, they brought them in. Why? Why did they bring in all these Russians? Not because they love Russians, not because they love Jews, per se. Why did they bring them in? They brought them in order to offset us, offset the ultra-Orthodox. So now, that's what politicians are saying. So, how can you have ultra-Orthodox Jews look the other way and allow non-Jews to come in? Right? So a handful of non-Jews allowed to come in, on a work visa, this and that, but you don't want pockets of non-Jews here. That's the whole point, the Jewish state. We've had a lot of problem in suburbs of Tel Aviv with these foreign workers. All kinds of problems. Crime, other things. Now you get intermarriage problems because you brought them in. So you tell me, okay, you don't want to rely on Arabs, you got to rely on foreign workers. Okay. But, according to Jewish law, you're not allowed to sell them property. They're not allowed to live here permanently. So you say we're not living according to Jewish law. Very good. That's another problem. Won't happen until the Messiah comes. But what's the point? Now, again, people are going to say this is a minority opinion. Not, 99.9% of all rabbinical authorities hold against this and say, no matter what, you got to go out and vote. You got to go out and vote. Because if you don't go out and vote, it's going to be worse. It's going to be worse. The 1% will say, how can you sit with these people in the government? How can you look the other way? How can you look the other way when things are going on? Desecration of Shabbos. You know what it's like, desecration of Shabbos in God's backyard? We're going to read next week, next week's Torah portion about destruction of Sodom. Right? We learned a little bit about this week, about how bad they were. So one of the commentaries asks, okay, I understand they were bad. They were pretty bad. So why did God wipe them out? Why did God wipe them out? I can understand, punish them, okay. Why did they have to be destroyed? You can say they were really bad, but, at the end of Parshas Bereishis, first Torah portion says, God says, I'm not going to destroy the world again, right? Because man is evil in general from their youth. So fine, man has to get punished when we don't do the right, right? Jews, non-Jews, get these no-hide questions in a second, right? Person's going to get punished for what they do. Okay, being punished is one thing. Utter annihilation and destruction, something else. Right? You see there's a command to wipe out Amalek. You see there's a command to wipe out, the nations that were here before the Jews come in. Before the Jews come into the land. So different reasons why one nation gets, is going to get annihilated and one nation not. They're only going to get punished, but not necessarily annihilated. But what's going on? What's going on by Sodom? You'll tell me they were very bad. True? Some of the commentaries say that what was going on, right? If they were doing what they were doing outside the land of Israel, it's also bad. No one says not. Also bad. Also punishment. Severe punishment. But they're not going to get wiped out. So what's the reason they get wiped out? So they say one of the reasons is because they're in God's backyard. They were in the land. They were so evil in the land, God says, I can't stand them in the land. I'm going to vomit them out. That's what the Torah says at the end of the book of Leviticus. Carpenter's language, chump don't want it, chump don't get it. Meaning, you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're going to get spit out of the land. 100%, you're going to get spit out of the land. Now, it's hard to imagine that today. We've been spit out twice. Right? We were gone for 2,000 years. More than 2,000 years. Right? And now I've come back. But is there any guarantee when the Messiah comes, Jews are going to be here? You're going to say, come on. Are they the most powerful army in the Middle East? Quote unquote. You really think they're going to get dispersed? It's a medrash. Rabbi was telling me this once. We were on the way somewhere. Driving him somewhere. He said, yeah, there's a medrash. Medrash in Psalms. That says the Jews are not going to be in the land when the Messiah comes. Jews are going to be in the desert. And when the Messiah comes, they're going to take all the Jews from the desert, bring them in the land. So Rabbi's telling me that, and I looked at him, I was like, what are you laughing at? You're also not going to be here. That you're also going to be in the desert. Now the question is, do we take that literally, or figuratively? Meaning, does it really mean we're not going to be here? It's hard to imagine, practically speaking. But guess what? You put a left-wing government in power, they'll sell us straight out. They'll give land back and then it'll be indefensible. Right? Just on that topic, there's no nation, right? You can Google this, right? There's no nation in the world that's ever fought a defensive war had to give land back. No nation. There was once in the 70s, there was a population exchange between Pakistan and India, based on lands, they've been fighting about forever. Okay, but we're not talking about a defensive war. Nobody's giving land back. Now, if you give this land back, anyone's ever seen a map, you give this land back, it's the heart of the country. It's the heart of the country, indefensible. One of the reasons they eventually took it over, and annexed definitely some of it. Because you had marauders coming from all sides. Yeah, people from Lebanon. Yeah, Jordanians, or became Jordan. Yeah, Jordanians, Lebanese, others, Egypt. All different groups. It was impossible to live here. It's declaration of the state. 1948, what's the first thing Arabs did? Attacked. Here, there, this, that. No one thought the state would survive. It's absolutely miraculous that the state survived. You got all these nations wanting to carve us up. It's not about the Israeli army. A lot of screw ups in the Israeli army also. But you say we got nuclear weapons, don't tell anyone. Okay, that might be a deterrent. Could very well be a deterrent, but guess what? If God doesn't want us here, look at the end of the book of Leviticus. If God doesn't want us here and we don't do what we're supposed to do, he can spit us out of the land. Now, if you were to ask and say, is that a question? Is that really something could happen? Maybe. According to nature, I would say no. It looks impossible right now. All I have to do is give some of the land back, and who knows? Who knows what could be, right? So the point, the point over here is that, again, comes to the land of Israel. What will people say? Sorry, if you live here, you got to vote. You don't have a choice. You go, you do what you got to do. You vote for the religious parties. That's it. And that, you should have a better government. That at least, we're not totally going to get discriminated against. You put the left wing in, totally demolish them. Take away money, all kinds of things. Take away programs to help out religious people, different things. I'm not saying the right's any better. They're definitely not any better. But, if it's a choice, you're going to side with them. Why are you going to side with them? Very simple. Because the other side's 10 times worse. Does that mean, these people are righteous or not righteous at all? Right? Not at all. If they had their way, they wouldn't rely on us either. But they have no choice. Without the Orthodox, the right doesn't get empowered. Right? We'll see what's going to be. They need us, no question. Not because they want us. Not because they're close to the tradition. They're also not close to the tradition. They could care less. Maybe a drop closer than the left, maybe. But they can also care less. Right? They're not interested. The goal, again, is to uproot Torah. So you're going to say, how can you live in such a place? Oh, that's a good question. Rav Shach, of blessed memory, when they asked him years ago, he was a Torah giant, the last generation, they asked him years ago, if they make a plan to draft, we're not going to get into this topic, but they make a plan to draft, all Orthodox Jews. No excuses. So then what do we do? So he said, we'll find a place to live. Who says we have to stay here? I remember when this whole thing was circulating. So my Rebbe asked, so they were talking, and the Eid Chared is the rabbinical court where, my Rebbe's the head of this rabbinical court. So he said once they were having this discussion, like if we had to go anywhere, where would we go? Where would we go? They're talking about different places. So one of the places they'd mentioned is, what about going to the Caribbean? Someone had an idea, maybe go to the Caribbean. So Rebbe asked me, I said, I got one question. Is it hot or cold there? I said, hot. He said, no, I'm not interested. He said, it's too hot, forget it. Whatever. It's harder to learn when it's hot or whatever. Right? And then you got other weather issues. But there was discussion. There was absolute discussion, because if they're going to make our lives a misery, it's going to be impossible to live here, in that sense, then, that's going to be an issue. Right? That's definitely going to be an issue. But, that the question really, it's a non-starter. Right? But the question, the question is, okay, so if you have religious parties as part of a coalition, and they're part of the government, and they know They know 100% this desecration of Shabbos going on right under their nose. So I have to bring down the government. They should bring down the government. Easily they can bring down the government, not a question. They can blackmail the government. Say, listen, you know, if you allow this to continue to happen, we're going to leave, right? But it happens. You know, they're not going to bring down the government, you know, especially we had 4 elections already, right? In the last 5 years. It's been a little bit crazy, this whole stalemate, you know, what's going on. But okay, you know, you want to have a stable government. But my question is, if you're part of that government, how can you look the other way? Desecration of Shabbos right under your face, right under your nose, right in front of your face. Guilty by association. You know, but you know, they'll say, you know, it's obvious if they're not going to bring down the government, you know, and they're not going to say anything and they're not stopping it, then either tell me, you know, they agree with it, which, you know, that's an impossibility. Can't be an Orthodox Jew and agree with desecration of Shabbos right in front of, you know, right under your nose, right? Or they're getting some sort of kickback for being quiet. Those are the only 2 solutions. So they must be getting something for not bringing down the government, because that should bring down the government. So how can you sit there? How could you sit there with people that, you know, everything they say is false? They're not, you know, their goal is to uproot Torah mitzvahs. So you're there to try and preserve the balance. Okay, that's the argument. That's the argument on the other side. They are there 100% to preserve the balance and at least get whatever we can. Right? So it's not worse of a desecration of God's name. That's the answer. Pretty pathetic answer, but that's the answer. Right? And that's what, you know, every rabbinic authority would tell you. That'll be 10 times worse if you don't vote. So the vast majority of people vote. And you know, even the ones that live here, you know, that's, you know, they can live here, not necessarily not get any benefit, you know, from the country. You know, some of them are not as extreme as that. But they won't vote because of that. Because of exactly that. So a person has to ask. They have to ask their own question. They have to ask their own Rebbe their question. Right? So someone asked me, said, why don't you go ask my Rebbe? He told me I'm not allowed to vote. So why don't you go back and ask him, because, you know, we need all the votes we can get. Someone told me the other day that his position hasn't changed. I can tell you his position hasn't changed. Right? But he said, if you're going to vote, then you got to vote for religious parties. That's what he holds. But he'll tell you, if you ask him, are you allowed to vote? Right? I mean, he's gotten, you know, he's not as strong as he used to be. Certainly his kids are, his grandkids are, but, you know, he would still tell you you're not allowed to vote. That's what he holds. So I tell people, go ask your own question. But I, you know, I gave it one caveat. And the one caveat is, you know, don't bring up great rabbis of the last generation said, yeah, you got to go vote. This one said it, and that one said it, and this other great rabbi said it. Great, right? So, you know, someone told me this once years ago when I couldn't vote. I never right to vote. I wasn't a citizen. So I told them like this. I said, do you hold everything what this great rabbi said, this other great rabbi said, or do you pick and choose? I said, I don't pick and choose. I said, you know, my rabbi is one of the greatest of this generation. Nothing to talk about, probably the greatest of this generation right now. Absolutely nothing to talk about. So I said, I take the stringencies with the leniencies. Been doing that for 25 years. I said, I don't pick and choose. You want to pick and choose? Go ahead. Don't rub it in my face. You're not going to rub it in my face and say, oh, this one said it and that one said. I said, my rabbi said no. And other great people, even greater than those people, said no. They're not the majority. True. 100% they're not the majority. But it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Person asks their own question. You know, the rabbi tells them you don't vote. You don't vote. He tells you can vote. You can vote. But I said, I don't pick and choose. So you know what the answer to that was? Nothing. Checkmate. That was the answer. They said, okay, good point. That was it. What's someone going to argue? I don't pick and choose. Right? I'll take the stringencies with the leniencies. So someone said, yeah, but he's got to change his mind now. He's not changing his mind. He hasn't gone senile all of a sudden. At the age of 96, it should be well. He holds you don't vote. But if you're going to vote, they'll tell you vote for the religious party. That's what he holds. Even though, most of his congregation votes. Okay. I always tell him if you had, 2 students, 5 students like me, you'd look different. He laughed. I said, how about one? He said, even one that listens is good. It's not a joke. So they say, why don't you go according to the majority? Because I have a Rav. I have a Rav that says it. I don't have to. Not a question going like the majority or not. He holds no. So whatever he tells me to do, that's it. That's why I always say it's my final authority. He says white is black, black is white. That's it. You don't like it, everyone's going to say, go eat kugel. That's what he said. That's what he said. Right now, is that a very minority opinion? Yeah. Right? In this case, yeah, it is. You know what? He's the one I asked all my questions. So, and he says it over and over and over again, this idea of desecration of Shabbos, and what's going on the land and how bad things are. What people are doing here. There's a lot of Torah being learned, very true. A lot of self-sacrifice for Torah, very true. But you got these good-for-nothings that are trying to uproot Torah and beat us down every second. That's what they're trying to do. And if they could, they would. And if they had a right in a way to send us out of the country, they would. They said it themselves. And not, brazenness is not one of their top things. They don't care. They'll say it to your face. They're not afraid to say it. There was a politician who said, and not in politics anymore, but this person said on the radio, live, heard it with my own ears, years ago, when we're done dealing with the Arabs, we're going to take on the ultra-Orthodox. She wasn't kidding. Friends of hers weren't kidding. Because we have the greatest amount of holiness, you're going to have the greatest amount of impurity. And there's going to be that constant battle. It's not about, oh, we have philosophical differences, this and that. These people are 100% ignoramuses. I'll give an example. Give one example. Somebody was in power years ago, was saying that, when it comes to conversion here in Israel, they make it way too hard. They ask too many difficult questions. Right? What was one of the difficult questions? What was one of the difficult questions they asked? That they said they should take off the test. Well, I can't make this up. One of the questions was, who was Moshe Rabbeinu? You got to ask that to a non-Jew who's going to convert who's Moshe Rabbeinu? I'll take it another step further. There was a rabbi who was teaching in the school. The school allowed him, to teach like once a week. But he said, you're not allowed to give over things so strong, this, that. He had to sign a document. He wasn't there to make kids religious. A secular school. He had to sign a document. They were terrified. It's going to make kids religious. So it was before Shavuos. It was before the holiday Shavuos was the giving of the Torah. So he started telling them a little bit about Shavuos, and it's all about Torah Shabbat Peh, about oral law, right? How King David is Jewish and different things and whatever. Because the Torah says you can't have a Moabite. It's going to be part of the congregation. So how could Ruth convert? Ruth is a Moabite. 3 generations later comes King David. Anyway, he's teaching them a little bit about Shavuos. So he asked them, okay, who knows? This is 400 kids, Israeli kids. You're not talking about Jews that grew up in Timbuktu or in the middle of the prairie somewhere. They don't know nothing about nothing. These are Israelis, Israeli kids. They asked them the following question. And the head of the school was there as well, watching this whole thing, right? The principal was there. So what did he ask? He asked the following question. He said, who wrote the book of Psalms? Who wrote Sefer Tehillim, the book of Psalms? Not one answer. Nobody knew. Nobody knew. The head of the school couldn't find a place to hide. So embarrassed. You don't know who wrote the book of Psalms? So this rabbi goes, okay, I'll give you a hint. And you don't like a hint like me, I would just tell you who it is, right? Anytime I tell my kids, I said, you want a hint? And I'll tell them the answer, right? So he said, I'll give you a hint. He said, David, as in David HaMelech, King David. He said, David, and they all said, Ben Gurion. David Ben Gurion wrote the book of Psalms. What are you, an absolute moron? David Ben Gurion? You got to be kidding. This teacher like ran out after that. 400 Israeli kids couldn't tell you who wrote the book of Psalms. So what does that tell you about education here in Israel? Secular education. They're not taught Torah, not taught nothing. Tanakh, not, cousin of my wife, secular cousin once said, yeah, I learned Tanakh once. Yeah, like it's a topic. It's like it's a subject. It's like, yeah, I learned that once. Well, they know about anything. About Torah mitzvahs. That's their goal. Their goal is to make them ignoramuses like themselves. To uproot Torah. They're not interested in Torah mitzvahs. So that's worse here. Because when you're messing around in the palace of the king, it's 10 times worse. 10 times worse. So if anyone's going to ask that, is an obligation to vote if you live in Israel? So yeah, majority of people say 100%. You have no choice. You got to vote. I'm pointing out there's another opinion. It's a big minority opinion, no question. Right? But I want people to understand. I want people to understand when they sit in governments with these ignoramuses and these heretics, doesn't matter what they know, what they don't know. They're sitting in the government with desecration of Shabbos in front of their face. So I'll ask you the $1.5 million, $2 million question. How can they sit there? How can they sit there and let desecration of Shabbos go on in front of their face? Because what choice do we have? Of course you have a choice. You nip it in the bud and say, no, you can't do it. You put out people to make sure that's not being done. And if it's done, you bring down the government. Oh, no, we're not going to do that. Can't do that. Because we're getting kickbacks. We're getting money. We're getting other things. So we'll look the other way. Desecration of Shabbos, you got the status of a goy gomor. Got the status of a non-Jew. If a Jew does that, and you're doing it in God's backyard, you don't think it's going to be payback? That's what my Rebbe says. He says, how can it be? Everyone's worried about Iran and these crazy people there. I'm not worried about that. God will take care of them. I'm not worried about that. What about these people desecrate Shabbos? What about these people have gay parades? And they want to march all over the place. One makes a protest. That's worse. That's 10 times worse. In God's backyard, you don't think it's going to be payback, God forbid? He goes, that's what I'm afraid of more than anything else. More than anything else. In this last government, day in and day out, decrees one after another against religious Jews. So you say, gotta get out and vote. Okay, that's what most people will say. Right? That's what most people would say. So how can you sit there anyway? Even if that's true. So you say you look the other way. What can you look the other way on? Gay parade, you don't say anything, you don't disallow it. But it's a democratic place in theory. Not even gonna go there. Right? It's a democracy. People can do what they want. Oh, this, that, and the other thing. You do it in God's backyard. Like my Rebbe would say, you make a protest, certain things. Even if no one's going to listen. You know why? Because if you don't, then what are you showing? That you don't care. Even if nothing's going to change. So this whole thing with the Russians, we started with. So I asked my Rebbe point blank. I said, you think it did anything? Think it accomplished anything? He said, it doesn't matter. Because I'm not going to get upstairs after 120 years. God says, hey, Moshe, how come you didn't do anything over here? How come you didn't protest? Oh, because nothing's going to come out of it. No one's going to listen. But it's my honor. You didn't protest in my honor. Now, some people say you don't protest. That's not the way to do things. Okay, but we have precedent that that's not the case. That there are times that you have to. But when you see something so bad in God's backyard, you don't do anything. Just sit there and say, okay, I'm going to say to him, I'm going to do other things. What I do doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. But you don't show any protest for a kavod shamayim, for the sake of God's honor. In God's backyard, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think potential repercussions are? That's the argument. Yeah, a lot of problems, a lot of questions here. Someone asked, The Noahites must have a prayer book. Do they have to have a prayer book? No. They want to say Psalms, they can say whatever they want. Right? They can quote from the book of Psalms, they can quote from Tanakh, they can quote from the prophets, from the writings. There are certain things I guess they would be allowed to say, like if they want to say the first line of the Shema, they want to say, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." That's a good thing, right? Declaring God's uniqueness in the world, God's oneness in the world, 100%. Right? That's a good thing. There is no Noahide prayer book out there. I can actually send you the link to it, right? But you can't pray out of a Jewish prayer book, out of an Orthodox prayer book, that's for sure. But there are things that we say on a daily basis that are universal, so that even non-Jews could say, right? So there is a prayer book that, let me just see here, I forget the name of it. Let's see if I bring it up here. There's a prayer book, it's called Brit Olam. Here, I'll put it up here. 1 second. It's called Brit Olam, and you can get it at the Noahide World Center. Right, that's one prayer book. It's supposed to be pretty good. For Noah, I think there's another one also. I just have to to find it. So but again, does a non-Jew need a prayer book? No, definitely not. Is there an obligation to pray for a non-Jew? Yeah, there's an obligation to, for them to thank God 100%. But do they need formal prayer? No. They can say as much or as little as they want. They want to quote from Psalms, they're allowed to. They want to quote from Tanakh, they're allowed to. They want to say similar things that we say that are universal, they're allowed to. 100%, they're allowed to. Right? So that, do they have to? No. But they should say something showing gratitude. They can say, God, just want to thank you for, for the human body. For being successful in business, for, my kids, my spouse, whatever, right? A million things to be thankful for, right? Now, do I have to make it into a formal prayer? No. But there is an idea for a non-Jew to be grateful, no question about that, right? That is very true. But does it have to be something formal? No. Someone asks, the anti-Zionist belief, I mentioned that. Right, I spoke about it. Their belief is you have a state of Jews that has nothing to do with Judaism, but they want to have a place where Jews can come and not be persecuted. That's why many of them fled Europe, before the Holocaust. Talking about before the Holocaust, because they don't want to be persecuted, right? So Herzl and the secular Zionists wanted a place that Jews could be there. So in a place where it's run by Jews, whatever, that they can have their own place and not be persecuted by non-Jews. Been persecuted everywhere. Persecuted in Europe, right? Persecuted in, all over. All over Jews have been persecuted. So they wanted their own state, wanted their own place. They just didn't care if it was Uganda or anywhere else. So the anti-Zionist position is that, they want to live in a place where it's going to be run by Torah and Torah values. The problem is, the place here is run not by Torah values. And their goal is to uproot Torah. That's why they're against it. Right? That's why they're against it. But others are against it, not just based on that, but based on you can't live here because you're only supposed to be in the land they'll claim when the Messiah's already come. That means you can't build up the land, can't have anything to do with the land. Right? So they don't have anything to do with the land in general. But if according to them, they're still going to live here, some of them are still going to live there, they will have nothing to do with the government because the government, or anything to do with, anything there, they'll have their own institutions and different things because they don't want to have their crummy little impure hands touching it. So they'll make them impure also. So that's why they're against it, because their goal is to uproot Torah. That's the whole point. Right? So if the goes up, Rabbi Chanan, in his small pamphlet called The Epics of the Messiah, said because the desecration was going on in the land of Israel, he said, who says I have a mitzvah to live there? He said, I couldn't live in Israel and see desecration of Shabbos. So he says, if there's desecration going on in the land, who says you have an obligation to live there? Or there's a mitzvah to live there? No obligation, zero. Right? So that's why they're against it. I mean, not to mention also, just throw out there, most people know, you have people from Yemen, that came and they took children away from the parents and secularized them and whatever, a lot of things they've done. They could have ransomed Jews during the war. They didn't want. They could have, they didn't want. Definitely have Jewish blood on their hands. I mean, also people coming from the Ukraine, right? The few Jews that have come, they also tried to send them secular places and this and that, totally uproot whatever Judaism they may have or not. Right? So yeah, problematic that way also. Someone asks, converting male, can they, in the process of conversion, i.e. a JIT, Jew in training, can they still wear towels and tefillin? A towels they can wear. A prayer shawl they can wear, tzitzis they can wear, yarmulke they can wear, tefillin no. Tefillin they should wait till after conversion, right? To right after conversion. So if they want to learn how to put on tefillin, okay, a person can get tefillin without any parchment in it, just learn how to put them on, so to speak. But yeah, that should be after conversion. Definitely should be after conversion. Yeah. Somebody asked, let me see. Someone asked, any problem with reading scripture at night for Noahide? No. Not an issue. They want to read more, they want to read less, not a problem. Right? Definitely not a problem. Someone here mentioned that the person, Noahide, says, I overcame a certain urge. Whatever, an evil inclination overcame it. Can you say, wow, I overcame the urge? Is that considered gaiva? No. It's not considered being conceited. Person can say, yeah, I had this urge, I stopped. That doesn't mean you're conceited. Right? That doesn't mean you're conceited. Can you rejoice about overcoming it? Yeah, but remember one thing. The evil inclination doesn't sit still. You overcame it once, he's going to come back again. He's going to come back a third time, a fourth time. You can be happy that you didn't do it, right? That's true. That's not being conceited, right? 100%. That's not being considered proud, right? That's not being considered, proud or haughty, right? It's not a problem. If a person, walks down the street, thinking they're God's gift to the world because I overcame this evil inclination, that's a different issue, right? But if they're happy they overcame it, yeah, that's not a problem. Right, you got to be careful. That doesn't lead you to be conceited. But for someone to say they beat the evil inclination, they're allowed to do that. I would just keep in mind that this evil inclination ain't stopping. You beat him today, he's coming back tomorrow. You beat him tomorrow, he's coming back the next day. Right? You are allowed to be happy. If a person learned Torah, let's say, right? If a person learned Torah, they understood something, right? They understood something well, and, they pat themselves on the back. Is that a problem? No. Also not a problem, right? Also not an issue. Why? Because it's something they get psyched up. They get psyched up for. They learned something. They understood it. It's a big thing for this generation. I heard a great rabbi once say, if you understood a certain thing, go have a piece of cake afterwards. That's it. We're living in a cream puff generation. So if we understand anything, it's a pretty big thing, right? That's not being conceited. That's not saying, wow, it's such a great thing. Look, I understood this. What does the Mishnah Pirkei Avos say? It says in Ethics of Our Fathers, if a person learned a lot of Torah, you shouldn't think you're God's gift to the world because that's what you're commanded to do. So how can you be conceited? You learned Torah. You learned a lot of Torah. Very good. But that's what you're commanded to do. So why are you going to have a chip on your shoulder thinking you're God's gift to the world? Because, you learned a lot of Torah. That's what you're supposed to do. right? But I'm not talking about a case like that. Here, you're patting yourself on the back, not because you're conceited, because you're happy, you understood something. Or maybe you understood something that's been bothering you for a long time. You came up with an answer, right? Something like that. It's a huge thing. We need self-esteem. There is a problem, though, that, too much self-esteem, person become conceited. So a great rabbi once told me that one of the big problems today is the fact that people don't have self-esteem. There's a big lack of self-esteem, right? So he said, for our kids, we got to build them up, tell them how great they are, this, that. So I asked them, I said, I don't understand, but if you do that, they're going to get conceited, think they're God's gift to the world. He goes, don't worry, I can deal with that also. I have ways to deal with that also. That's not the problem. So he's telling me, based on experience, what's the problem? Lack of self-esteem, right? That was the problem. That was the problem. So for somebody, to be thankful that they overcame the evil inclination is a huge thing, right? It's definitely a big thing. You have, again, I'm going to clarify. You have to be careful. You definitely have to be careful, because you don't want it to get to your head. You don't want to think, oh, see, I beat him this time, I'm going to beat him again, and this and that. The evil inclination come back 10 times stronger, right? So, it's a good thing. We need self-esteem. We need to feel good about ourselves. Plenty of things to feel rotten about ourselves and what we do and other things. But, it's good to have positive reinforcement. Definitely good. But you got to be careful. You got to be careful with that. Someone asks, do you have to pray verbally prayers of gratitude? You should say it out loud. Doesn't mean you have to scream it, right? But you should say it out loud enough that you hear it. Now, what's the difference? Because there are certain things that if a person thinks it's nothing, thinking it's, we're all about action. So if a person thinks certain things, that's also good. But normally we say what I think doesn't really matter in general. But the point over here is that if I verbalize something, it has more of an effect on me. Like my Rebbe said, people asked him during COVID what, people going out of their minds and having, lack of faith, lack of emunah in God and this and that. So he said, you should say this mantra many times during the day. God, you're the one who runs the world. You're the one in charge. Whatever's going to be, I'm going to serve you. Doesn't matter. Right. But you're the one in charge. Even when there's no COVID, we should be saying that. You're the one in charge. I can't do anything without you. So I gotta put my best foot forward. And you could either say this is going to be good, it's not going to be good, it's going to be hard, it's going to be easy. You're the one calling the shots. But I have to put my best foot forward. True. Always have to put my best foot forward. You know what? We get slammed around. And you say, okay, throw up your hands and say, you say, okay, it's not my burden now. I'm putting all the burden on you. You got big shoulders. You can do anything at any given time, right? Clarifying, like the blink of an eyelash, can change things at the blink of an eyelash. Things can change overnight. Now, maybe sometimes it does, maybe sometimes it doesn't, maybe it takes longer, but you know what? That's the mantra, day in and day out. You're the one in charge. I'm nothing without you. You call the shots. By the way, I need this, that, and the other thing, but you're the one in charge. So if you don't think I deserve it, okay, so I don't deserve it. Maybe it's not my time to get it. Maybe it'll be later, whatever. But you're the one calling the shots. I'm only relying on you. And that's the thing we have to remember. It's not about who we have in Congress or anything else, right? It's not who the leaders are. God's the one calling the shots. We want it to be good, right? We want God to have mercy. So we want to invoke that as well. I'm an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. I deserve nothing, but I have a list of things I need over here. I don't deserve it, but, you should have mercy. And I'm trying and I'm working on this and, you should have mercy. Doesn't mean you're going to get answered straight away. No. Doesn't mean it might take 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, could be. God wants the prayer from the depth. He wants self-sacrifice. That's what he wants. That's what he wants more than anything else. That's the difference between the pretenders and not the pretenders. right? The ones who make it, and the ones who do what they need to do under any circumstances, they're going to make it. And they're going to have a high place in the world to come. And the ones who give it lip service, that's what they're going to get. They might have a portion of the world to come, but it's going to be a lot smaller. Right? God wants to see self-sacrifice. Total self-sacrifice. And again, does that mean everything's going to turn the way we want? No, doesn't mean that. There are going to be trials, there are going to be tribulations, but he's the one calling the shots. That's what we have to remember. Right? And it's not about anything else. It's not about senators. It's not about people in power, this, that. God's the one in charge. Right? It's one of the things we learned from the Holocaust. Never, ever, ever rely on men. Can't rely on men. God's the one calling the shots. Is it true that you're not allowed to study Torah at night? No. There is a question about saying Psalms at night. Right? Many hold that that's the best time to learn. That's when there's the greatest, what's the word? That some say that's the greatest time to learn is at night. Learning at night for sure. Right? There is a question, you're allowed to say Psalms at night. That there's a question. Some say, you shouldn't, because it's a time of judgment. Nighttime can be a time of judgment. So some will say, you shouldn't learn Psalms at night. Others say it's not a problem. Right? My Rebbe holds it's not a problem. You can do it. You're allowed to say Psalms at night. All the more so you're allowed to learn at night. Yeah. Any other questions? Again, somebody asked why does it upset people so much? Someone just to clear his word, because God doesn't want. If God wanted war to be clear, it would be. Right? See what's going on in the Ukraine right now. Why did God want Russia to attack right now? Don't know. He's not going out anytime soon. What's going to be? I don't know. Right? But why doesn't someone do something? Because God's pulling the strings. When God wants it to happen, it'll happen. Right? Leib Malachim, you have to remember, Leib Malachim biyad Hashem. The hearts of kings are in the hands of God. So when God wants to pull the strings, he'll pull the strings. When he wants things to happen, it'll happen. When, what, where, okay, that's God's decision. He hasn't told me recently, right? What his plans are, right? Because he knows I got a big mouth. So, he's not coming to me telling me what the plans are. But, he's the one pulling the strings. 100% he's pulling the strings. When he decides, he'll do it. And when not. Can pain make someone's reward in heaven higher? Yes. It's called the Fitzar Agra, right? The amount of pain a person goes through is the amount of reward they're going to get. In other words, if they're going through a very, very hard test and they're able to overcome it in different things, right? So, that's the case. You'll get much, much greater reward. That's for sure. It depends on the test. So, if a person, let's say, suffers in this world, whatever the suffering is, and also very true, suffering will atone, right? But they have to acknowledge that this suffering is acting as atonement. In other words, a person, God forbid, suffering from whatever disease, God forbid, they're suffering tremendously. And they acknowledge that the suffering 100% comes, it's coming for the sake of atoning for sin. Then they get atonement. If someone just sits there and they're in pain and say, oh, woe to me, I'm in pain, and this and that, they don't get atonement for that. I mean, it might act as a certain level for atonement, but they have to acknowledge it. Right? The Mabit in Beis Elokim, in his work, Beis Elokim, says that you have to, I think that's where it's brought down, He says you got to acknowledge it. You got to acknowledge the pain is there to atone. If you don't acknowledge that, the pain has an effect. That's true. It does have an effect, but not the same as if, it's not going to act necessarily as atonement. I'll tell you a story of Mordechai Pogromansky. Tells that Eli, blessed memory, was dying of cancer after the war. And he was blind. They wanted to give morphine. And he picked himself up on his bed. He put his finger up to heaven. He said, God, give me all the pain now. Give me all the pain now. He says, I'll take all the pain in this world. Because you know what? Because I know this pain you're giving me and all the suffering, it's because of the sins I've done. So you give me all the pain, you do whatever you want to my body. I'm coming straight to you in Gan Eden. I'm coming straight to you in paradise. Now, is anybody today on that level? No. He was unique in his own generation, right? He's one of the Torah giants of the last generation. But when he was dying, that's what he said. That's exactly what he said, right? He said, do whatever you want, my body. Give me all the pain. Give me all the suffering now. Because I want to come squeaky clean the next one. Unbelievable level. Is that something that most people are holding by today? No. We get a little bit of pain, we can't take it. We just say, get rid of the pain, get rid of it. Give me something, get rid of the pain. The more pain, the better. In that sense. Because you understand it's atonement. Right? We don't want it, but if it comes, that should be our attitude. Right? The question is, pain can make someone's reward greater if they acknowledge it's for the sake of what's it called? It's for the sake of atonement. It's atoning for sins. So if a person admits this is going to be atonement for my sins, very good. But if they're just suffering and say, woe to me, I'm suffering this and that, it'll act to some level of atonement, but not the same. Will not be the same. As if they're acknowledging it's atonement for sin. Someone asks, Rebbe Kiva really say Jews can marry Samaritans? Don't know. I mean, if the Samaritans were Jews and they held by Torah mitzvahs, I don't see why not. But if that's not the case, then no. Then I don't know why he would have said it, right? So that I don't know. Someone asks, what's it going to look like? What is the world going to look like after the Messiah comes? Well, a third of the world is going to be wiped out, right? The prophet tells us it's going to take 8 months, clean up all the bodies, 8 months, right? And so maybe it's not totally nuclear, right? But 8 months, clean up all the bodies. A third of the people survive, a third of the people get injured, a third die. So it'll be interesting, who's going to survive over here. But what's going to happen is, evil inclination will be destroyed. Evil inclination will be destroyed. The Rambam says this world will be no different than the next. So we're going to be in a human body doing similar things. Others say not that way, but you'll have resurrection of the dead. World will get destroyed. You have resurrection of the dead. Whoever's supposed to come back, will be resurrected on that great day. So now the whole question what that world looks like. According to the Rambam, doesn't look any different than this one. According to others, a totally different one. It's being, a spiritual being in some type of body that we don't understand. We don't know what type of body. I asked my Rebbe about this once, and he said, different type of body, we don't know. And I asked him again, he said, listen, I never met anyone who's been in that world and come back. So we don't know. I looked at him a third time, he goes, we don't know. Right? So we don't know. But at the end of the day, there are 2 time periods, right? One is Olam Haba. So we consider the next world, the reward person's going to get, and then it's resurrection. Some say they overlap. Some say Olam Haba comes first. Then you have resurrection, whatever, the whole discussion. Right? A lot of different opinions over here. Again, the Rambam holds, so it's not going to be any different. Not going to be any difference this world and the next. Right? It's not going to be any different. This world and the next. Others disagree. Others see it more as a more spiritual world. Even though we're in a physical body, the question is, what does that physical body, look like? Because the soul has to be You're not just going to have souls flying around in this world after the world comes back. So soul has to be in something, be in some sort of body. Right? The question is, what type of body is it? We don't know. Nobody knows. Someone mentioned this thing about Rabbi Akiva and the Samaritans. It was in the autobiography. Okay, so I'll have to look into it. No, I don't know. That I don't know. The Vilna Gaon, the students say in the name of the Vilna Gaon of Elijah of Vilna more than 250 years ago, there's no question if there's going to be a war of Gog and Magog. Right? Some say World War I took care of that, World War II took care of that. Others say there's definitely going to be a war. But if there is going to be a war, something's going to be a spiritual war, right? But if there is going to be a war, the students of the Vilna Gaon said in his name that it's going to take 12 minutes. It's going to take 12 minutes. Now, a 12-minute war must be nuclear. Must be, so, there's no other war that can take 12 minutes. It's going to evaporate people or kill, tens of thousands, millions of people, right? So they must have been talking about nuclear, right? That, even though there weren't planes in his day, there wasn't anything like this. So he was foreboding, saying that, there's going to be a war. It's going to take that amount of time. So you must have meant in our language today, you must have meant, in a world that's going to be missiles and nuclear weapons and all that. Someone asked, we're going to wear clothes in the world to come. If according to the Rambam, we're in a body, so we'll have clothes, right? Again, maybe the human body will come with clothes. I don't know. I would assume, but I don't know. It would make sense. It won't be an evil inclination. So it could be. You wouldn't need clothes. Could be. If the Rambam holds there's no difference, then you'd have clothes. Seemingly you would have clothes. Right? But it probably makes more sense like that. But again, it depends what type of body. Right? If you're not talking about a normal body, so then what type of clothing are we talking about? Or a covering or something. I don't know. It's a good question. Any other person? If someone say thank God for the internet, no. That for sure you can't say. Why not? Why not? The reason is because there's a lot of terrible things that go on through the internet, more bad than good. Right? Now someone will say, come on, there's there's a lot of Torah that you could learn on the internet. True? 100%. There's also a lot of wasted things you could do also. A lot of forbidden things a person can do as well. So, to say that, thank God for the internet, in theory, you could say that, thank God there's a lot of Torah on the internet. That you could say, right? But to say thank God for the internet in general, I would say 99% of what goes on is forbidden. Lashon hara, immorality, all kinds of things. It's like I told people, people told me, watch TV is not so bad. I go watch the History Channel. I said, do you? Said, no. Go watch Doctor Who. I don't even know he's still alive. Probably not. Right? Do you? No. So 99% of it's bad. There is some that's good. I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say it's all bad. Right? But, there are pop-ups that come up. There are other things person looks at. It's just a waste of time. Total waste of time. Right? Most of it. But you can say, thank God for, Torah classes and videos on the internet. It's true. There's a lot of good things. A lot of bad Torah on the internet also. But, there's a lot of good as well. Someone points out 80% is pornography. Could be. I don't deny that. That's probably true. That is definitely true. Right? It's probably true. But, and the other 19%, it's probably all lashon hara and other stuff that's also totally forbidden. So it's I would say for the most part it's all bad. Again, is there good Torah on it? Yeah. You can say thank God for that. True. Most people wouldn't be here if it wouldn't be for the internet. It's true. that is true. So, but person has to know how to use it. And guaranteed, a lot of times, just, people are there just wasting time, a lot of time. I see people all the time, my travels, their face stuck to a screen. It's just unbelievable. It's just, I shouldn't say I'm surprised. I don't know why, why it should surprise me. It's just, it's nauseating. It's more nauseating when they bump into you. Oh, sorry. Yeah, take the phone, put it in your pocket, look up so you don't bump into someone or into a wall or something, and go on your way, don't bother me. It's annoying. I'm not gonna say it's not annoying, but everybody's looking. It's crazy. So and again, halavai, yeah, they don't be listening to Torah, halavai. Right? We'll give some people, we'll judge them a little bit meritoriously, but they're not. 100% they're not. Most people, right? So you can't say the whole thing is good, for sure not, right? Most of it. So I said 99% is bad, 100%, right? So the 1% that's good, okay. So you can thank God for that. For the 1% that's good. If it's not a problem with immorality, it's a problem with wasting time, or lashon hara, or other things. Someone asked, what's the true meaning of the term flowing with milk and honey? It's not literal, right? It's certainly, it's not literal over here. So the question is, what is the, what does it mean over here? Right. So the Torah says in Deuteronomy chapter 31, right? Or 29 verse 9 to 31 verse 30, right? That the land is known as the land of Israel, the land of flowing milk and honey, right? Chapter 31 verse 20. Right. Now you could tell me it's talking about the land's gonna be fertile, desirable. Right. So, it could mean also the Gemara says the milk's gonna flow from goats, honey's gonna flow from figs, abundance. Right, abundance over here, because goats were a source of milk, certainly as meat, certainly in biblical times. Right, no question. So, you see that the land of Israel today is flourishing. Center of high tech is here, etc. So when the Jews came back, the land flourished. When the Jews weren't here, Mark Twain came, Samuel Langhorne Clemens, as he was known, or known as Mark Twain, came in the late 1800s, place was flattened like a pancake. There's nobody here. Flattened like a pancake. The students of Vilna Gaon we mentioned earlier, they were digging out the swamps and all that. They couldn't live here. It's almost impossible to live here. Jews came back, whole different thing, right? It's a land that flourishes. So you got a land that's got, all kinds of things. You got homes, you got schools, parks, this, that. That's what it means. It's going to flourish, right? That's what it means. Yeah, that's what I'd say on that. Any other questions? Someone asks, what happens in our dreams? Our soul has to be awake to fight with tests. Your soul's not awake. Your soul's in the upper world, right? When a person sleeps. That's why we have to say Moda'ani, right? Thank God for giving your soul back. If you didn't give your soul back, you die, right? So we don't know where our soul goes. Our soul does, but when it comes back to the body, we don't have to remember anything. And the dreams we have aren't worth anything either. Most dreams are a waste of time. They're probably, a person might have had eaten something spicy before they went to sleep, or, it's something they were thinking about during the day, during the week, whatever it is. So it's not about, the question is, in our dreams, our soul has to be awake to fight with tests. Well, if you're not awake, how are you going to fight them? It's not like the soul's going to go in the spiritual worlds and fight all our things. We don't know what goes on. We don't know what the soul's doing, in the spiritual world. Fact is, the soul comes back, okay. The soul comes back, but again, most dreams, Most dreams are irrelevant, totally irrelevant. There are some dreams that are significant. A dream of a king, head of state can be significant. God giving information or whatever. But, those dreams are significant. Most dreams, though, probably waste of time, right? And trying to figure it out also wastes of time. And a lot of times we don't remember the dreams anyway, right? But 99% and almost 100% of all dreams are meaningless, absolutely meaningless. Someone asked, can't we thank God for all our challenges, including those on the internet? You can thank him, but again, we're not, we pray every day. We're not looking for challenges. We're not interested in challenges, but you don't grow without them. That's also true. So, I can tell you, over the years, I can tell you a handful of times, me personally, I said, God, I want to thank you for this challenge. I count on one hand, probably in a couple fingers, right? I say, okay, I don't know what you want over here, but I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. It didn't happen very often. Doesn't happen very often. Can a person thank God for our challenges? Yeah. Someone sent me a PDF, very interesting PDF, that, things that Rav Victor Miller was thankful for, which I mentioned many times, a lot of things we should be thankful for. And he was thankful for so many different things. Let me see if I find it here. I'll just point it out here. His gratitude list, right? These were things that, people told him about that he didn't have. Right? Let me see if I can. These are misfortunes that happened to people he knew, which he was spared from. Right? One was stuttering, asthma, hay fever, allergies, color blindness, Parkinson's disease, cerebral palsy, limping, being in a wheelchair, cane, crutches, prostate problems, retarded, deaf, dumb, blind. I mean, he's got a whole list here. He's got a whole list. He's got a whole list over here. Right? So plenty of things to be thankful for. Right? A lot of things. He said I don't have these challenges. Totally didn't have these challenges. So, can you thank God for our challenges? You can thank them. You can thank them that, help me out in different ways. Right? But very few people are going to do that. I'm not saying you can't. I don't think most people are going to do it because challenges are hard. They're totally hard. Someone asked if a person's learning Hebrew on their own. Is there a way you could saying it correctly as far as prayers from the siddur? Yeah. Once a person feels comfortable, you can say prayers in English. Better not to, but you're allowed to. Right? You're definitely allowed to. And if they're in English, if it's transliteration, I don't recommend it, but someone can say gets a prayer book, it's transliteration. Once you learn how to read Hebrew, it's gonna be worse. Why? Because then you're gonna have to relearn how to say the words, because sometimes transliteration is not good enough. Right? And a person can make mistakes that way. But yeah, if you want to learn, until your Hebrew gets better to say it in Hebrew, you can wait. You can certainly say in English, though. You can certainly say prayers in English. Couldn't the honey be Torah? Yeah, but it's talking about the land, right? It's talking about the physical land, right? But it could be in spiritual terms, yeah, 100%. That the land filled with milk and honey is Torah mitzvahs. Because the land's not worth anything if you don't have Torah mitzvahs, which is one major thing we mentioned before. The Zionists made a mistake, serious mistake, right? They think you can live in a land without Torah mitzvahs, right? And that's a mistake because Torah can't be passed down that way. Yeah. The question here. The question of a fig. The question of a fig, that you have a wasp goes in and there's a male in there, goes inside an unripe fig, lays some eggs in there. How is that kosher? Well, you have to check a fig for bugs. right? Figs are infested. Figs in general are infested, and therefore, since they're infested, then you can't eat them, right? But even if they were in there, you got them out, you could eat it. I mean, you could eat around it. I don't see why you couldn't eat around it, but that's going to be the problem, right? Not just this problem. The problem is that there are bugs, right? If you have bugs, you can't eat them, right? So just because they might be in there and do this and that and the other thing, so what? So what? Doesn't mean they necessarily stay in there, And if they do, so in theory, you could cut them out. You could cut them out, and eat around it. Now you can say that's gross. How could you eat it? Okay, right? But they're infested. They're generally infested. I'm not saying you can't check them. You can check them. There are ways to check it. I don't recommend it. They're infested. They're totally infested. Totally infested. Yeah. Any other questions? Could it mean also fertility, new life, and a blessing, and an abundant blessing? Yeah, land of milk and honey could be. Could be. Somebody asks, just let the wasp be, find another fig. Well, if all figs are like that, you're gonna have a problem, right? That's the point, right? So if you have all figs like that, then you got a problem. But they're generally infested, so I wouldn't recommend eating them. There are, again, I'm not gonna say you can't check them. You can check them. There are ways to check them. I wouldn't recommend them, right? If you want to, you could, right? I'm not that desperate to eat a fig. So what about, let's say you had a fig spread, and you know that there were potentially bugs in there, so you can eat it. Why? Because those figs. So even if there were bugs in there, they're totally ground up. So if they're totally ground up, that's it. I'm allowed to eat it. I can't. If there'd be one whole bug in there, yeah, then you can't eat anything. Then you couldn't eat any of it, right? But if it's ground up, same thing. A person goes to a kosher falafel place, right? They're making falafel balls, ground up chickpeas. The bug got on there, got ground up. You didn't know, whatever got ground up. Can I eat it? I can eat it. You say, oh, it's gross. It's okay, but you could eat it. Why? Because it's not a full bug. If it be a full bug, that'd be a different issue. If it's already crushed up, different issue. Figs, strawberries, what else you need to be aware of? Strawberries, yeah. We're not to check them anymore. They're totally infested also. Dates have to be checked. Any fresh, I wouldn't even recommend fresh cauliflower, broccoli. Those are totally infested. Also, frozen might be a different issue. Depends on the company, because they clean it in a different way, in a much better way. But yeah, if you want to eat it fresh, it's pretty much impossible. It's infested. Cabbage, you got to check leaf by leaf. Lettuce, unless it's like totally cut up, you got to check leaf by leaf. Also, someone told a friend of mine, what do you come on? Lettuce, head of lettuce, what are you talking about? No bugs in there, open up from the inside. It's like Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, if you know what I'm talking about. It was like there were bugs all over the place, right? Not that you couldn't see it the naked eye. They were there. It's like, oh, it must be, an old thing, this, that. No. All right, you got to check it leaf by leaf. What else? Apricots, got to check. Dates, you got to check. Other fruits and vegetables, peaches, plums, pears, oranges. You just look at it on the outside. If you don't see any webs or a hole in it, then you don't have, they're normally clean. You don't have a problem. Most vegetables, same thing. I would say nuts. Nuts you should open up, right? Nuts stay for a long time. So therefore, the way they're stored could be a problem. It's just, they could be, you have to check each one. Canned things also, let's say chickpeas. Chickpeas are whole, you got to open them up. Cut them in quarters and check. Might be bugs inside. you have to get a bug light? Yeah, it's a good thing to have. I don't have one, but it's probably a good thing to have. Just to be able to see clearer. If you don't have a bug light, you can look at a regular light. It's not as good, but you should be able to tell. As long as you know what you're looking for. Flour or batter mixes. Flour you have to check. Flour you should sift unless it's already sifted. You should get a sifter, special sifter for that. Otherwise, it could have bugs in it. Also, batter mixes, you don't have, if it's kosher, you don't necessarily, you don't have to worry about it because if it's already, if you're already going to mix it up, it's probably, you should check. You should just spread it out and check and see if there are any bugs. But yeah, that would be an issue. Rice in the States, you don't really have to check. It's pretty clean. Rice here, yeah, you should check. In Israel, and like any nuts, those type of things. Just the way it's stored is a problem. Sugar, you don't really have to check. It's not really an issue. In theory, you could find bugs in it, but usually you don't have to worry. It's usually not a problem. There's a question. Let's say cocoa mix or something like that. Maybe like flour. You should just spread it out and check it a little bit. I don't know, but what else would I say? Those are probably the main things. Those vegetables we mentioned, some fruits, but again, a lot of things you can just look at with the naked eye. If you don't see any holes in it, let's say you get a carrot, you see a split in the carrot. Now you got to cut it open because maybe there's a bug in there, right? But in general, if I don't see any webs or anything or any holes, you see a hole in an apple, cut it open, right? Could be a worm in there. You don't know, right? Americans in general just stick it in their mouth and chomp, chomp, chomp. You should cut it open. You should get in the habit of cutting fruits and vegetables open. Fruits for sure. Someone asked, I know of a guide for the right kosher symbols. I can send you that, which which ones you can rely on. Yeah, any other questions? Let me see if there are any other questions here. Person thank the government for giving them money for welfare. Yeah, why not? Right? Why not? They're helping you out. It's not a problem. You definitely thank them for that. Any other questions? All right, there are no questions. I'm going to sign out. This is every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, 5 o'clock normally Israel time, but they haven't changed the clocks yet in the States, so it's going to be an hour earlier. Otherwise, anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Kaufman. We're on Orthodox Conversion Judaism, or you can send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBIChaimCoffman.